Hi, welcome back to the Professor Mango Show, the podcast where we have a gimmick that Mango here is a professor and I'm the one translating all of his thoughts. Thank you to today's sponsors of the video, the Ferguson, Kendall, and Slanter Literary Law and Audible. They are both the sponsors of today's podcast. So today I wanted to talk about The Farmer's Bride by Charlotte Mew. And I thought it was a really interesting poem. It's written in 1916, which is right as feminism started to begin. So you will see a lot of that in here. And I really like how she points out the flaws in her society, specifically on the tradition of marriage throughout her poem. It's a dramatic poem, which is really interesting. This doesn't really happen with those. And she uses objectification and metaphors along with breaking the pattern of how she sets it up and utilizing tonal shifts throughout the poem. So I wanted to break it up into stanzas, or break up the analysis into stanzas. So I'll talk about the first stanza, then the second, and the third, and I'll point out each technique that she does and the different unique features that she has. I'm going to start reading the first stanza so you get an idea of what it sounds like, and then after that I won't read the poem, but I will translate each of the stanzas to help understand further. So, The Farmer's Bride by Charlotte Mew. 3 summers since I chose a maid, too young maybe, but more's to do, at harvest time then bid a woo. When us as wed, she turned afraid of love and me and all things humane. Like the shut of a winter's day, her smile went out, and 'twasn't a woman, more like a frightened little fay, more like a little frightened fay, my bad. One night in the fall, she ran away. So, Charlotte utilizes the language of uneducated farmers to help portray this idea that it's not quite a noveline, I think is what it is. It's a specific form of poem, but it does have iambic tetrameter a little bit. It has slanted rhymes to help show that he's not well versed in the language, and this is the farmer's point of view. What she's saying in here is, 3 years ago, I chose my wife. She may have been young, but I didn't care. After that, she grew distant and cold to me, and one night she left me. The author uses allusions and metaphors to help portray that this character who is speaking doesn't really respect his wife. For example, in line 4 through 6, when she said she was afraid of love and being human and she shut me out like a winter's day, he's comparing her to winter, which is cold and distant and not very loving. And he then does this again when he compares her to a frightened little fay in line 8. A fay is a fairy, so he's comparing her to this mythical creature and not a person, and he's talking about her as if she is less than a human, when he should be talking about her as someone who is loved. So that's an interesting point that will be elaborated further as we continue. He didn't care that she was a kid. He knew that she wasn't ready for these things because it says so in lines 1 through 2, too young maybe, but there's stuff he has to get done, and he blames her for leaving. Like in line 7, her smile went out and she 'twasn't a woman. He's saying her smile went out. He's putting the blame on her, which is not fair because she is a minor. And then he blames her for leaving again in line 9, where she says that she ran away, not he drove her away or I drove her away. So next we have stanza 2, where he says that she was out with the sheep when he found her. She seemed scared, so I got my friends to help me get her and bring her back home. We had to lock her in her house for the better. Again, he is using the language to make her seem like she is less than. So in this case, it's an animal, more like a creature something that is alive and wild, rather than a sophisticated person, which is usually what people describe other people as. This is seen in lines 10 through 11. Among the sheep there she be. She shouldn't probably been a bid. Line 13, lying awake with her wide brown stare. That's something that you would see a goat be described as, almost. Like, creepy farm animals have a creepy wide stare at you. Line 15, we chased her, flying like a hare. He's literally using a simile, comparing her to a rabbit. And then 18 through 19, we caught her, fetched her home at last, and turned the key upon her fast. They had to lock her away really quickly. These are all reasons why he blatantly disrespects her, and he has no respect for her. He doesn't question why she ran away. He just blames her for his toxic behavior, and this is what the author is trying to do. She wants to show the flaws in the marriage system and wants to question the role, because it's not sacred anymore. It's tainted practice now. And she then rejects it later in stanza 3, where the author says, the farmer says, she does the housework for me. She tries her best because she is so small. She loves to play with the animals, but she does not go near other men because she is too scared of them, and she doesn't even talk to me that much. Again, he is comparing her to an animal. We see this repetition throughout the stanza. Lines 21 through 22, as well as most, but like a mouse. Again, another direct simile to a small creature that is usually seen as delicate. A hare and a mouse are both seen as delicate little creatures that need protecting. And then in 23 and 24, happy enough to chat and play with birds and rabbits and such as they. Again, comparing her to an animal or a creature that is less than a human. And he draws out the fact that his wife is afraid of him and other men. Authors always make a choice, and Mew is making a choice to say that he does not know why his wife is afraid of men, even though he is the one mistreating her, and she gives those hints throughout. But in line 24 through 26, so long as menfolk keep away, not near, her eyes beseech, when one of us comes within reach. That is not good. That is not that's not a great relationship to have with men. And then again in 29, he literally says, I've hardly heard her speak at all. She is so afraid to speak to him, and that's not a loving relationship. That's just ownership, which is the point of Mew's poem. She wants to show that marriage is not what it used to be. It is owning a woman, and the woman clearly doesn't like it, even though she is a child, which is a whole another topic. So then in stanza 4, this is really important because this one is the 4-line stanza that you see in this poem. And it says, even though she has been shy, I still like her. And why? What should she feel about me? The author wants this part that he speaks to be emphasized. And it's really important that he is questioning this, because it is a foreshadowing for the warning that is to come. Sweet as first wild violets to her wild self, but what to me? It's all about him still. It is always going to be all about him still in this. So then in stanza 5, it goes to say, even though time is passing and it's almost Christmas time, what would life be like without her? I'm so sad. This is the first time we see the tonal shift, because after that really important stanza with the 4 lines, he shifts his whole image of marriage, because of course he does. He is still trying to get pity from the audience. He is now trying to manipulate us into thinking that he is the victim, when in reality it is the wife that is not being loved. This is specifically seen in Some Other in a House Than We, line that I'm talking about, line 41. he is worried about himself. The we is our. But he wants to include her as like a unit for once. Stanza 5 isn't too important because it's the passing of time, just to show that she has been estranged for a long time. It is important too for the whole poem. I must correct myself again, but it's not important for the argument of the poem, is what I'm trying to say. What is important is stanza 6, which is thought originally that was one long stanza, but again, she wants to break the pattern and make this the most important part, which is the actual warning for young girls of what could happen to you when you get married too young. She says, she sleeps by herself in the attic alone. Poor girl, we are so different, and she is so anxious and so scared. This is what the farmer is saying about her and describing her, but no one really wants to be described that way. This is breaking the pattern again because this is foreshadowing, and it specifically says that in line 42 and 43. She sleeps up there in the attic. She sleeps up in the attic there, alone, poor maid, 'tis but a stair. She's again being an object and being used, and this is a warning to young girls to just wrap up the whole poem. It's the conclusion to her argument that marriage is not good and it's not what it used to be. And it's clearly seen by the men in this poem, or the situation, and the women. And it could be for the reason that men don't listen to women, especially in 1916, before this is the suffrage movement, and men were the ones that were voting against women because they didn't want them to have their rights. And it could be easier to convey your message if it is a man talking, because they won't look down upon women. So I believe that this is why she wrote the poem she wrote the poem in this way, so that the men could get an idea of what women mean, even though she still showed the toxic traits. Because they could have these toxic traits. They could do these things. She does this specifically through the objectification and the metaphors, the breaking the pattern, and the tone shift to make it so that you could gain pity onto the girl. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I am so sorry for my speech. I have a hard time public speaking, even in front of a camera, but Mango has no trouble doing it. Do you have anything else to add? Is too tired. He does not have anything else to add, but thank you to today's sponsors again, the law firm I mentioned before, and Audible for sponsoring today's podcast, and we will see you next time, hopefully, because you are such a fun professor, Professor Richmond.